Oh, what a day! What a lovely day!
Welcome to Flat Earth Debate. I'm your host, Nathan Oakley, and if you're new to this channel, or you have not done so already, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell notification icon to keep up to date with the Flat Earth Debate. If you would like to support this channel, there is a super chat that runs alongside each of these shows while they're live, and there's also a PayPal link in the info box below the video once it's rendered. Most importantly, if you would like to join the discussion, simply mute the page you are currently watching, then click the link in the info box below this video to join the panel and express your views on the shape of the Earth. If you do join, please don't swear. If you do, you'll be ejected, and if you are, please don't try to rejoin the stream using sock accounts. You'll be warmly welcome back on the next stream. Please also share the show. Sharing the show obviously increases the live audience, but this in turn increases the chances of a more diverse panel. So please share the show. And one last time, if you're new to the channel or you've not done so already, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell notification icon to keep up to date with the Flat Earth Debate. Now we are joined by Arwin, Sleeping Warrior, Mark Doxy, and Adam. How are you all doing?
Hola.
Doing the best. Hello, gentlemen.
Good afternoon.
All good afternoon, gents.
Excellent. I'd like to, before we do any housekeeping, get straight on to getting something out of the way, which is this water nonsense, if you don't mind me using that term. So, Adam, you're here currently for that exact reason. So, can we kick off with you?
Yeah, by all means.
Well, hang on. Let me just remind people what the actual claim is, because it's me that's kind of stirred the bear, or poked the bear on this one. As far as we can tell, the claim by Sheeps and Neeps is that water is an element in its own right, and you cannot get hydrogen or oxygen from water. That is essentially the claim. Now, obviously, I've asked different people to look into this, and as it happens, within Flat Earth, there is a chemist, and it looks like we can debunk this claim with our own people, so that we don't look stupid as a long-term result of this. So, Adam, tell us why you can get hydrogen and oxygen from water, and it's not an element in its own right.
Water, by definition, is a combination of two elements, oxygen and hydrogen. But water, as of itself, does have very strange properties, some elemental in themselves. So, and it is, even now, by chemists, not fully understood how and why it does these things within our models. And that's important to comprehend. Nobody, as a chemist, pharmacist, whatever, pretends they have 100% knowledge. We have functional working models which give accurate predictions, and that's the reality of most science, isn't it? We don't understand it. I've never seen an electron, to qualify the point, but there is straightforward understanding of things we can predict and do and measure and quantify and validate within chemical experiments to show that what we're getting is what we think we're getting and where we're getting it from. So this is the first point, that we can't get water. So as we're on that, I'll probably just cover electrolysis first. Then pure water is pretty much unable to conduct electricity unless you find really high voltage through it. And that's because as a pure substance, it's very happy and doesn't ionize in any way on its own. And it's this ionization of the water that allows electricity to flow more freely. And like I said, when it's on its own, there is no ionization of the water molecules. But when you do put other salts, acids in there which dissolve within the water, that also creates additional ionization of the water molecules. So you get hydroxide and hydrogen ions forming as well, which helps the flow of electricity. Now, I think one of the experiments that was being talked about is the catalyzed reaction of water using sulfuric acid to produce hydrogen and oxygen gases at the anode and cathode. And there seems to be, from my comprehension, people seem to be a bit confused as to what the sulfuric acid in there is doing. There's a claim that the oxygen and the hydrogen are coming from the sulfuric acid, the H2SO4. But if you look at these reactions, and this is measurable and quantifiable, first of all, you do get hydrogen gas and oxygen gas formed. And if you take those two gases and stick them back together and ignite them, you do actually get water in the vessel at the bottom. But with regards to the sulfuric acid, literally all it does is ionize the water to enable the current to start the electrolysis process. And because the water is much more reactive and wants to stabilize again and is less reactive than the sulfuric acid, to put the SO4 molecule, the SO4 doesn't get involved in the reaction other than to catalyze it. So at the end of the reaction, there's the same amount of sulfuric acid as there was at the beginning. There will be less in total because some of that will have been converted into hydrogen and oxygen. I hope that makes sense. I mean, the only way to if we had the vessel with the water in, we did the electrolysis on it with the sulfuric acid in there, and we had put in one gram's worth of sulfuric acid and we had 100 grams of water. If we did that reaction and we reacted away 10 grams of water, we would still have in there the 1 gram of sulfuric acid. And you could measure that by, because the concentration of the sulfuric acid is increased in the overall volume of water because the volume of water is decreased, you could actually measure that by testing the pH, because the pH of the water would decrease, get nearer to 1, i.e. it would become more acidic. So that is measurable as well, even within, as the experiment's going off. Now, if the hydrogen and oxygen gases were coming from the constituent parts of the sulfuric acid, then what would happen is the pH of the solution would increase as the amount of acid available would decrease. You would also be left with a sulfur residue, which is part of the reason why the SO4 ion doesn't get involved, and it allows the OH ion to break down. I can go into the reactions at both the anode and cathode, but it's probably a bit difficult without a presentation or stealing somebody's YouTube stuff. But it's out there. Go and have a look at it.
Can you just, because that's the crux of part of the argument, so I know it's difficult, but if you can try and verbalize it. I am following along so far.
Okay, I'll try my best. So once you apply the current at the cathode, what's happening is you've got this electron spinning round and you've got a hydrogen ion being attracted to the cathode. That then pairs up with the electron and it leaves you a single unstable hydrogen atom. When that reaction occurs twice, those two hydrogen atoms find each other very attractive, bond together and form hydrogen H2 gas, which is then released, which is the fizzing you see at the cathode, and you can gather that gas. Now, the way we test that gas is you collect it, it's lighter than air, so you can just tap it off, and you take a lit splint and put it over the test tube and you'll hear it pop. And in the bottom of the test tube, from that pop reaction, you'll see the water as the hydrogen reacts with the oxygen in the air, and that forms the water. So that's at one end. That's quite a simple reaction. Now, it's a bit more complicated at the anode, and this is where the sulfuric acid kind of catalyzes the reaction, and it's all about donating or giving away electron movement again. But within that, basically on the anode, because it is hydrolyzed, you've got these OH, these hydroxyl ions, OH minus, and they're kind of collecting at the anode. And what they do is, again, they're unstable. That's quite a strong alkaline OH minus. So you get two of those, and they will react together to give you a H2O molecule, but leave you with a spare oxygen, which is, again, unstable like the hydrogen. Now, once that reaction happens twice, okay, you're then left with these two oxygens, which again are looking to pair up. They again pair up, giving you one oxygen molecule and two water molecules. So the way, does that make sense?
So far, so good.
Yeah. Now, the sulfuric acid, the SO4 molecule kind of gathers around the anode, and it kind of assists in electron exchange around this anode, because it's got a great big capacity of electrons. So it assists in the reaction to kind of allow and facilitate these hydroxyl groups to change form and then react like that. At the anode, you can collect this gas, and this one, instead of, you actually kind of need to tip the pipe down, because the gas coming off is actually heavier than the air in it is. So you have a pipe that goes down and you kind of pour it in to your test tube. And this one, you take the lit splint and you blow it out, so it's just embers, and you pop that back in that test tube, that ember splint, and it will reignite. Because there's only pure oxygen in there, so the reaction's quite, that small amount of heat with the oxygen is sufficient to get the flame going again. So they're kind of the proofs of that, and obviously within that, like I say, you can do pH measurements, you can do water volume measurements, to validate the fact that you've got less water but the same amount of sulfuric acid in your reaction at the end.
Cool. Very good. Thank you for that.
So let me ask a couple of questions.
Yeah.
I'll be honest, I let a lot of that go over my head, because you're using phraseology and terminology that I'm just not familiar with. I do remember the words. I don't know what they all mean. I can't remember what they mean, and I'm not going to try now, because I'm an ignorant guy with regards to chemistry. I know my limits, and chemistry is one of them. But what his claim is that one of the things I heard him say was that you cannot do this unless you add something to it for it to work, to be able to split it down, and that was his authority for why it's not made of hydrogen and water. You have to add something to it.
Yeah.
When you said that you add whatever it was that you said to it, and it basically what's the word? It stimulates or allows, opens the door to the electrolysis process.
I think the word he used was assists.
Assists, yeah. Does it mean, therefore, from his point of view, that by adding something to the solution, no longer what he's doing is he's making a correlation with the solution and therefore getting electrolysis to work? So therefore, in his it appears to be the case that he thinks that by adding something to the solution, an element in its own right, what's his point with regard to adding ions to it?
The point of adding it is to catalyze, to speed up the reaction. Now, you can achieve electrolysis of water without a catalyst, but it's bloody dangerous, because you've got to use exceedingly high voltages to force it to happen. Yeah. So the purpose of the catalyst is to just make that whole process a little easier, because by adding it to the water, it changes the water's pure state, where it really isn't ionized. The H2O molecules are sitting and as H2O, none of them are breaking up and forming OH and H plus ions within themselves. But as soon as you put that sulfuric acid in, not only is the ions from the H plus there, it also makes the water a little bit more ionic as well in of itself. So that's how it assists in the reaction. But like I said, it gets involved at the anode, but at the end of the reaction, once that water molecule has reacted, the sulfuric acid molecule is still there.
Yeah.
I mean, that is by definition what a catalyst is, though, isn't it?
Exactly.
The other thing, one of the things I heard him talking about was why, if a fish passes water through its gills, and that's where it gets its oxygen from, why does a fish not exhaust out the hydrogen if it's removed the oxygen from the water? That was one of the things he said.
Because it's a fish's gills is taking soluble O2 that is contained within the H2O and extracting that. It's not taking the O out the H2O.
Correct. So if you've got I only know this because I've got a mate with a very, very big fish tank, and he had to clean it out and put all the fish in a paddling pool, and he had to constantly go in and splash the water to force oxygen to be, like you said, I don't know what the word is for it, but to be soluble inside the water. But you are literally adding air to the water. You're aerating the water, and that is what they extract.
Well, one of my friends that I asked, and I won't name him because I say friend loosely, he's a baller. So therefore, by definition, he can't be friend. But what he said in response was, and just tell me if you agree, the oxygen that fish breathe is literally dissolved oxygen gas. Just like you can dissolve carbon dioxide in water for drinks, you can also dissolve oxygen gas in water. So what he's saying is that it's dissolved in the water, but that doesn't mean that you're going to break the bond. You're just taking the dissolved oxygen that's in the water, and that's what they're feeding on. And you have to add, like Nathan's just said, you have to add to it if there's not enough oxygen in the dissolved oxygen in the water. So his point is not correct in the first instance, it would appear.
Excellent.
Exactly.
Well, that was probably more time than I wanted to dedicate this, but obviously it's
I was
not an
going to
easy
say
subject.
there's one more bit, Nathan, which is the bit that Sheeps is really arguing about, which is the calculation in terms of the cylinders. I don't know if you want to address.
Definitely. I forgot you had mentioned it. My bad.
Can I screen share and
Yeah,
just pull up his calculation? Is that okay?
Yeah, go ahead. I'll pop you on, so you should put it on screen.
Try and keep it as brief as I can. So I love a calculation. So this is what intrigued me when I saw it and I watched the video. And I think it's pulling the wrong numbers from the wrong places. If you see on screen, he's saying, look, 50 litres of liquid hydrogen is this, 50 litres of liquid oxygen, and he's going to take 2 lots of 50 litres, so 2 hydrogens and 1 lot of oxygen to make his water. But you can't do that. You can't use those amounts because, and I'll try and explain this as quickly as I can. Oxygen O2 has an atomic weight of 16, okay, and hydrogen's got an atomic weight of 2. Now, if we were to just pretend simply that the 50 litre of oxygen weighed 16 kilograms, it keeps it simple. So if we had 16 kilograms of oxygen, right, and we wanted to turn that into water, what we wouldn't need is another 2 lots of 50 litres. We would need a weight, a mass of hydrogen to react with it. And we would need we would need twice as many hydrogen atoms as we would oxygen atoms. So this is where you have to kind of convert to molar equivalence, which is, as Sheeps referred to Avogadro's number, the 6 times 10 to the 23 thing, which is the number of atoms in a mole. And this kind of makes the calculating a bit simpler. So if we say we want, in that 1 cylinder of oxygen, we've got 16 kilograms, we've got 1,000 moles. So what we need to react with that is twice as many hydrogen atoms. And we know that 1 hydrogen atom weighs 1. We've got 2 oxygens in this. We actually need 4 hydrogen atoms to match up to that. So that would be a weight of 4 kilograms. So instead of needing, as he's put in there, 7 kilograms, you'd only need 1 and a bit cylinders to give you the 4 kilograms. Now the 4 kilograms of hydrogen plus the 16 kilograms of oxygen gives you a total mass of 20 kilograms. When you react those gases together, which are of that weight, and that's all that matters, their volume that they take up as a gas two separate gases is kind of irrelevant to the physical properties when you combine them together. Because at room temperature and pressure, the gases are gases. They're still gases. They're just exceedingly well compressed in those cylinders. But when you react them together, you get a liquid formed, which is obviously got slightly more compact molecules. So what's important is the mass of the two things we've reacted together. So when you react them together, you would get 20 kilograms of water, which would equate to give you 20 liters of liquid water. That's what you would get by reacting that 50 litre of oxygen tank and 1 and a bit tanks of the hydrogen.
Perfect.
Yeah.
I think that was a very concise debunking.
So I guess the conclusion is let's persuade Sheeps and Neeps to drop this one, and let's persuade that other group. What's that, Mike and Mike?
I'll just summarise it so that the maths is there correct for the. I wanted to do it that way so you could understand it easily in terms of molecular weight. But if you take the 12 kilogram cylinder, then you actually need 3 kilograms of hydrogen, so less than 1 of the hydrogen cylinders. That produces a total of 15 kilograms, which gives you 15 litres of liquid water in the calculation requested by Sheeps and Neeps.
I don't see any point in addressing Pete and Peter because none of us know who they are.
No, but what we can do is let people know that this claim is stupid and it isn't supported with. I mean, to be honest,
I'm not saying it's stupid, mate. That's my understanding of the problem, how it's presented to me. And like I say, I just saw Sheeps and Neeps saying there isn't an explanation. I just wanted to put how I, as a flat earther, understand that this problem that's presented differently. I heard A-level maths, respond, and I didn't feel he responded with an establishment answer, whatever you want, using the standard chemistry model. Hopefully that is an understandable explanation from, the standard model's way of viewing it. And like I say, it just seemed a little bit, there seemed to be a bit of confusion about what was being reacted and how much was being reacted, and mixing volumes of different, like 50 litres of hydrogen is going to take up, is going to have a different amount of molecules to 50 litres of oxygen. They're not going to compress at the same rate. So you're going to have different numbers. That's why you have to work on molar and weights to react it. And that's why I think the calculation goes askew, especially when you start to try and consider volumes of gases as equivalent conversion to volume of liquid.
well, let's get back to the original question, right? And it's a yes/no answer. Can you get hydrogen and oxygen from water?
Yeah.
And the other point he said was it's an element in its own right. Is that accurate? Is that true?
No, it's a combination of two elements, hydrogen and oxygen.
Right. And that's basically what everybody understands. And I'll be honest, I didn't really understand everything that you said. But I'm happy to accept that what you've said is probably right. And unless somebody's got evidence to prove that it's wrong, because I've seen, I mean, I think what we all need to do is just acknowledge that this claim is not accurate, and we should just put pressure on him to drop it, because it's not going to be something that anybody's going to want to remember flat earthers for. Let's stick to the topic that we know what we can talk about, which is there's no curve, there's no gravity, there's no axial rotation, and this nonsense about whether water's got hydrogen and oxygen in it. We need to say to him, look, this is not right. Stop talking about it, because it's making us look stupid, and hopefully he'll drop it.
Well, maybe he's doing it on purpose. Maybe he just wants to get to the top of the line of the Google searches when people look for flat Earth. Because it is stupid, and Google definitely wants the most retarded flat earthers to appear on top.
On the other hand, just in his defence, and I'm no fan of Sheeps and Neeps, but you've got to kind of throw everything out when you realise you've been part of a massive deception, and you can't just say, well, that's a given, this is a given, I won't question that. So, in some ways I do actually commend him for questioning these things. And it means it comes down to somebody who is actually working in that field, i.e. chemistry, coming along and saying, this is how I understand it works. Now, Adam's been fairly, not coy, but not even careful, but just what's the words I'm looking for? Concise in terms of his presentation and what he's saying he understands. And it is an understanding.
Yeah, I've never
I think
seen
also
the electrons go from the anode and the cathode. You know, I've never seen that. What I'm saying is the model we have, yeah, is predictable and works, and the outputs and the inputs are definable and measurable. And it can be, I would ask quantum to say it, but I do think scientifically that can be demonstrated that that in this case sulfuric acid catalyzes the reaction. It's still there at the end. So I'm not getting into bitching about anyone because that serves no purpose. That's what ballers do, man. If one of us has got a problem, as flat earthers should be able to respond like this and say, come and have a chat. I'll quite happily explain it and go through it from my perspective with you, dude. You know, I don't want to attack anyone. There's no point. You know, I learn. This is my degree. Do you know what I mean? So, but I learn off of other flat earthers as well, and maybe I've made false assumptions where I've been corrected and learned from people. I know Zach's taught me a lot recently, so you know, I don't see it as a point of.
The thing, and I'd echo the same words. I think he's right to question everything because, like, once you realise that they're lying to us about certain things, you have to then question everything because it does give you a different set of eyes for everything. But it's not as if he's claiming that we live on a spinning testicle, which is ridiculous. He's questioning the science of it, and I don't really see that as invalid. The inquiry itself's not invalid, but he's not doing what you ballers are doing. He's not lying to us. Yeah, he's questioning something, and he might have got something inaccurate or wrong, but he's not lying to us. He's not telling us that we live on a sphere when there's no evidence to support the assertion that we do. He's questioning that what we're told, and that's fine. But I just hope he drops it and gets back to what we should be good at, which is proving that there is no curvature, axial rotation, gravity, pressurized thing next to a vacuum of space, etc. Because really, that's where we're all strong when we're all together on that point. And I know that ultimately some people say, well, why do you have to keep going over it? You're flogging a dead horse. Well, there's new people in it that have not heard the arguments before, and they come in this chat. And again, it's one thing to get something wrong about water, but to assert that we live on a spinning testicle is ridiculous. So in the context of telling lies over making a mistake, it's nothing compared to the biggest problem in the whole of the topic, which is you ballers tell us that we live on a spinning testicle, and we don't. So in that context, you lot, you can shut up.
Right. We do some housekeeping.
Yes.
Any signs of curvature?
No.
Anybody?
There is a claim of curvature, yeah.
Who's that?
Did you see my video I released last night?
I think I've watched both. You've released 2 in the last 24 hours. I'm pretty sure I've seen both.
There's a paper that's gone around from 2000 claiming that basically measuring the curvature of visual space, right? But the claim for curvature of visual space is not actually measuring anything.
Oh, you mean
it's ridiculous. I think what I'll do is I'll come back to that. So we'll move on from that.
No, it's a good subject. The problem of intrinsic curvature on a flat plane. Yeah, big problem. There ain't any.
It's full of double speech. Should I go through that paragraph?
Definitely.
Okay. Screen share. And then I'll have to find it. Bear with me. Let me just knock it off screen share while I do. Can't remember what I've done with it. What did I do with that document? Just trying to remember. I hope it's going to be cached in history. Hang on. Give me a minute. Go through some of the other housekeeping. Let me find the document.
I've got one for you. It's not. It's Josh was chatting the other day with Max Egan, and he's not a flat earther. He was saying, you know, one of the things that stops him is he says he can see curvature in triangulation over a mile, where there's a variation of 1 minute or something. It's something I want to look into, so I'm just going to mention it in case anybody has any knowledge about it. It's probably arming the ballers, but
No. Give us some more detail.
let me see if I can find the exact. It's something I want to look into.
Well, that triangulation over a distance is what this point of this paper that I'm just about to show is.
Yeah. Well, I thought it was an interesting link that's being used as, he's read it somewhere that, you know, this variation is demonstration of curvature. But I've had a little look and I've struggled to see where it's demonstrated other than, you know, his citation of it. So
Right, you're up, Anthony.
All right, so there's a Sarah Christina. I'm not sure if she's in chat today, but she sent me a message and just said, "Can you look into this?" This is being used as proof of curve. Apparently, it's a direct measurement of the curvature, right? So I thought, oh right, okay, I'll have a look at this. It's an article dated 2000, so it's quite relatively new, and it claims to be the direct measurement of the curvature of visual space. Now, that's not the curvature of the Earth, but it's being touted as the curvature of the Earth that they're measuring, and the method that they're doing is triangulation. But what basically in any paper, you can generally read the gist of it with the abstract, and it'll give you an outline for what it is that you're about to read before you read it, so that you get the context and the prose. And in this document, the first 4 or 5 lines are really the issue, and it's just full of doublespeak. So it starts off by saying that we consider the horizontal plane at eye height. Now, I mean, I didn't take issue with the horizontal plane at eye height because locally, of course, we all see the horizon is flat. So in the context of what they're talking about, I didn't jump on this phrase, even though I've been cited as doing so in the comments. I ignored this bit because it's contextually, on a small scale, it is flat. We consider the horizontal plane at eye height. That is all objects seen at the horizon. But then it says, although this plane visually degenerates into a line in the visual field, the depth dimension. Well, we can ignore the second part. It starts off by saying, although this plane visually degenerates, right? But shouldn't it be saying, although we live on a sphere? They shouldn't be calling it a plane if we actually live on a very gradual sphere. And they should say that although locally it's flat, it appears to be flat. It's because the Earth is so huge. But they don't. They describe it as a plane. Now, this is not concise. This is not very scientifically accurate because scientifically speaking, we don't live on a plane. We live on a sphere. But they start off with this plane, and then you have to look back at the other sentence that then also uses the word plane, and then move to the third sentence, which says, we address the problem of intrinsic curvature of this plane. But again, they've referred to it as a plane. So they're addressing the problem of intrinsic curvature. Now, if you look at the meaning of the word intrinsic means essential, mandatory. It must be there. So they're talking about the problem of the of this plane. Well, if we live on a plane, then it is going to be a mandatory problem of curvature, not just a problem of intrinsic curvature. It's going to be an intrinsic problem. You can't have a curved plane. So it's riddled with doublespeak for the first 3 paragraphs, first 3 or 4 sentences. Even if you ignore the first sentence, which is what I did do in my video, I ignored this bit and I focused on the other words that are telling us that we live on a plane. Now, if this is truly scientific and credible at source, then you would not start off by saying these innuendo statements that have double meanings. You would be clear and concise about what we're supposed to live on. You would say that locally it appears to be flat, but the world we live on is actually spherical, but we're too small to see it. But they're describing it clearly as a plane, right? Which is, it's pure doublespeak. And anyone that reads this, and we shouldn't even be having a semantic discussion about the meaning of what the prose is in this document. It should be clear, and it's deliberately cryptic, and it shouldn't be. And if you can't see that as a baller, then you're never going to see anything if it smacks you in the face. It's pure doublespeak, it's pure cryptic, and it is ridiculous. Anyway, moving on. The gist of the gist of the document talks about some cities from different places of different distances, and then what it talks about. The one thing I need to just go back to the top a sec, because the one thing that it talks about in this document is experiments were performed outside in the natural environment, and it says in the thing, angles were directly measured by a novel method of exocentric pointing. Or what does a novel method of exocentric pointing mean? So, quick look at what exocentric means, and it says involves the setting of a pointer so as to visually point to a target where both the pointer and the target are objects in the visual field. So what they're doing, that is a really convoluted way of describing aiming, essentially. That's what it seems to be talking about. But it talks about this novel method of doing this. So when I scroll down to the pictures, it shows what this novel method was. Now, as much as we all try our best, at best, this looks like something that me and Nathan would rattle up in the kitchen. It looks like they've got two camera stands with a bit of gaffer tape sticking this box on it. And this is something I made, Blue Peter style. And Nathan's got this like spear sticking through it. And then there's this like a bit of gaffer tape stuck to a ball thing that's here. Now, this is supposed to be scientific, but they're describing this as novel. And I would describe this as ridiculous because this is neither novel nor scientific, but it's being passed off as such. And there's obviously the bystander here that's controlling some element of the experiment. But look at the credibility of this, right? If this was me trying to present something to prove that the Earth was not a sphere, would the ballers accept this? Of course they wouldn't. This would not be acceptable evidence of anything. It looks ridiculous, but it's being cited as, quote, novel. Well, if this is the standard in future, if I cite any of my observations as novel, then you guys are going to have to accept it because this is claimed to be novel and it looks ridiculous. But anyway, the point is the conclusion that they come to, and cutting it down really short, is they apply spherical trig to targets that they cannot see and are told are there, and they measure the angles to these said targets that they cannot see but are told are there, and they apply it based on spherical trigonometry, right? And then they conclude that there is curvature in the Earth, and you can see it clearly here. It says experiments were performed outside under natural viewing conditions. They're instructed not to move. We measured the angular excess for equilateral triangles with sides. We found the angular excesses and deficits of up to 30 degrees. From this data, we constructed the metric. The curvature changes from elliptic in near space to hyperbolic in far space. At very large distances, it becomes parabolic. There was somewhere where it actually said that the curvature it meant that the Earth was significantly curved. But if it's significantly curved, then it's not that massive that we can't detect it. So it can't be significantly curved if it's also so big that we can't detect it. We should be able to detect it, and it's full of doublespeak, and it's embarrassing. But this is being cited at the moment by some to claim that this is the curvature of the Earth, and actually, it's not. There's no curvature measured in here whatsoever. And even if there was curvature being measured, it's of visual space. Now, whatever you interpret or define visual space as, it's certainly not the curvature of the Earth. There was no observer function in this. There was no measurements in this other than angles, and the angles they were measuring were not related to anything other than what they believed that they were looking at but could not see. Fundamentally, it fails on pretty much every corner, and it almost seems to be propaganda. But the fact that it's full of doublespeak with the word plane continuously in the first paragraph is enough for anybody to laugh at this. So if you're going to push this as claim of curvature, we're just going to laugh at you because this is not proof of anything, and it's about as scientific as sugar puffs. Anyway, I'm done. Next.
I do think it links, mate. I've found the brief description, and like, please don't ask me to qualify it, but I think it is the the same sort of point. So it's described as, when I said like doing triangulation over a mile, it's been described as you get a surveyor and mark out an equilateral triangle, each side 1 mile, put a marker stick on each corner, and there we go. Get a theodolite that can measure very fine increments and measure the angles. They should be 60 degrees, but over 1 mile they are not. The angles are out. They are ever so slightly too wide by 1 arc minute in 11 arc seconds, i.e. just over 1/60th of a degree. And that is due to the curvature. It's how they discovered curvature to begin with.
Due to
So that's
perspective.
kind of
It's due
what
to
I'm looking
perspective.
into. But
Sorry, got it. Sorry, just let me get this in. Just let me get this in.
Yeah.
This is the debunking for geodetic surveying. All
Yeah.
they're doing is ignoring perspective. That's it. do love these calm little moments.
Oh, I thought my internet connection had
Yeah,
centered or something.
gosh,
That's exactly what I thought.
Not at all. I said they're just ignoring perspective, and that was
Please hold.
long silence. That's fine by me.
Hello,
I
James.
thought you. I was expecting you to expand on that point.
Hello.
Hi, James.
No, I think that was my. But that seems to be what this thing's describing, Anthony, isn't it? As you say it there, it's curvature in visual space. It's again describing what's happening in the eye and how we're measuring in the eye, isn't it? Or through an optical measure instrument like a theodolite.
There's no curvature in visual space. There's curvature in the Earth, but there's no curvature in visual space. There's nothing there to curve.
Well,
Curvature
hold
in
on.
the eye.
Oh, hold on. No. You've got to remember we're in the middle of a transition, so we're going over to the bending of space-time, are we not? Einsteinian gravity.
Are we?
Well, that's what modern science is preaching. Science in quotations, of course. Pseudoscience, astrophysicists.
Well, if the claim is that they can do it over a mile, why hasn't it been done?
Why hasn't what been done?
Prove the curvature over a mile with triangulation.
There is no curve. What are you talking about?
Well, Adam's talking about the claim that is a mile in a triangle, like a mile by a mile by a mile, and you can see the curve. The claim is that the curvature can be demonstrated, right? Is that right, Adam?
Well, that's what it's saying, that there's a variation of one arc minute, 11 arc seconds. So that's what I want to look into. So if anyone has any reference to that in terms of data, what's been done, I mean, it's described there, and as Nathan says,
that's why
it is perspective. It seems to be
Okay.
an error in the theodolite.
Right.
lens, which
Yes.
is-
Yes. It's just perspective. That's why this was met with silence the first time. Okay. I'll give you a video to go and check out. FEPE Perth, Flat Earth People Everywhere, FEPE Perth, has done a video on exactly this. I shared it with you, Anthony. You watched it. And he points out the error in a theodolite or a dioptra app. And he quantifies it with images he's been sent by a baller that he specifically requested on his video before the one that he's got out currently. If you give me 30 seconds, I'll go and dig out the video and I'll post it in the chat.
So Alex Quaint says in chat that it has been done repeatedly. Can we see some evidence of that, please, Alex? When you're ready, some links, maybe, perhaps, maybe join the panel and talk us through how many repeatedly times it's been done.
Yeah,
We'd all love to see this.
Sorry. So when he joins, Alex, just show us where they account for perspective in any of this. That's all I would be asking.
Van Vane says, Nathan Riley, can you please reach out to Steve and Non Sequitur to see if you can get Landon Court Knoll, the 200 IQ moron astronomer, world record holding mathematician and computer scientist? Even if we did get him, Steve would somehow manage to troll the debate so badly that it would end up somehow being a shitfest. I don't really see the benefit of getting in touch with this guy. If it was to be done somewhere else that was like kind of impartial, good at being a moderator, then perhaps. But on the Non Sequitur show, it's just it's a shit show for ballers. It's ridiculous.
Just a note too is that theodolites don't measure curve; they measure slope or gradient.
Linear.
Absolutely linear. Yes.
Oh, what
Linear.
else is linear? Perspective. The video's called Very Fake News, so I'm going to stick this in the chat now. Just copy the link. Yeah,
Flat Earth
Fepe Perth,
presupposes
Very Fake News.
Flat Earth presupposes 2D reality, and this is not what we observe. No, we presuppose perspective and argue that we should be considering perspective, and we do not consider perspective. What you guys call curvature is what we all realize is now perspective, because there ain't no straight lines on a curve, which is all we see. Our eyes see spherical wavefronts of light, really. And if you've got any evidence of that, spherical wavefronts of light, does anybody know what that means? flat Earth presupposes light is also a line. It is not. Yeah, according to Fermat's principle on the trajectory of light, it is a line and it's straight. What are you talking about, you fool? It's time path of the wavefronts. What are you talking about? Who is that ugly Bob Nodal, the fraud scam artist? You're a fool. Talking gish gallop. Why don't you join the panel and let's see what evidence you've got for your assertions?
Well, it's like what they were doing in that other document with the plane and making triangles fit and everything blur. They talked about the Gaussian value. Gaussian is an amount of blur that happens with light, with, you know, vision, with televisions, with all kinds of stuff. It's used in printing, Gaussian blur and stuff, and it's fairly well known. But that it's a long step to take Gaussian blur and say it's proof of curvature of the Earth, which is basically what they're doing. They're saying that fuzziness that we see way over there and we triangulate it mathematically, right? We get the curve from a plane. They're calculating Gaussian blur.
Yeah, they're looking at an effective perspective, the horizon, and saying it's a very useful measuring tool. And if we co-opt the mathematics for a perspective and simultaneously ignore it, we can just relabel it as curvature. Happy days! Now we're on a ball. I'm having this effect today.
You should have to stop rounding points off so well.
I don't mind doing that. And I quite like the silence that follows. I've got to be honest. It's a nice change. Normally you get to your point and there's no silence. There's just the next point being brought up immediately.
By Arwin. Anyway, I'm just having a quick brew. I'll be 2
I
minutes.
disagree.
I knew that was coming. Totally predictable.
I sort of like
Disagree
my...
by Arwin statement.
Did you see at the end of the Lord's Prayer for Flat Earthers, Arwin?
Where? What?
Somebody sent Anthony, I know he's not here to talk, he's gone for a brew, but somebody sent Anthony a version of the Lord's Prayer that had been adapted, and I'm pretty sure the end words were Arwin as opposed to Amen.
Oh, that's nice.
You'll have to check it out. It's on Anthony's channel.
Gravity
Sleeping Warrior.
might be included as part of like an Immaculate Conception.
That one you'll have to go
It was
over with me.
conceived and
You'll
it's
have to give a bit of clarity to that,
immaculate
Jimbo.
type of thing. Maybe it is the product of Immaculate Conception.
Was Newton a virgin when he made it up?
Oh, that's a good question. If he was a eunuch or whatever.
Was he a eunuch? He says in a very high voice.
Possibly. Voluntary at that, yeah.
Fair enough. Did not know that.
That was he was. Being sarcastic.
Was that you mumbling about eunuchs? Mumble.
Sorry, was I a bit outside? I don't know as he necessarily was. I was just being sarcastic if it was a virgin. Immaculate Conception. But... That means
maybe Glober's...
done housekeeping, Nathan, and yeah, no gravity finds here. I've had a look.
Maybe Glober should have one of them removed to support the idea of the globe model.
I mean,
Run around with one in their sack.
I called the show Water Revisited, but it might be nice to get through at least. And I'll sod it. We're going to be doing another show in 10 minutes, so I might as well just start with the fresh housekeeping on that one.
Yeah,
We've got through one.
I wanted to mention on water too is, you know, often it's a byproduct of most organic synthesis that is done. What you do is you take one molecule that has OH available, an acid, whatever, and one that has a hydronium available, a free H. When you cook them together, you drive out water, and these two things come together.
Wasn't water a critical part of the whole photosynthesis? You know what I mean? The plants basically transforming sunlight and CO2 with water into carbohydrates. And
No, There's
and
the thing,
oxygen.
exactly.
And the
So
other way around. So when we consume glucose, then CO2 and water is released.
absolutely. You
Exactly.
see, here you have what is basically carbon is basically a metal. It's a semi-metal. It's black. It resists electricity instead of conducts it, but it's called a semi-metal. It's a metal. Just doesn't
Metal.
have a few characteristics. But here the plants take it and mix it with water and make food for us. When we eat carbohydrates, we're eating a metal combined with water. And you know, it's funny because combustion too, when you burn something, including a carbohydrate, what do you get? CO2 and water.
Indeed.
They were both made of carbon, they were both made of oxygen and hydrogen, but they simply recombine and take a new form and they're ready to start the process again.
Hey Dan.
Good old carbon cycle.
Cheers. Dan.
But again, we're breathing a superfluid metal. We're running around eating metal that's hydrated with water, proteins that have more metals. We depend on riboflavin, cobalt, other vitamins, trace metals. All these metals are running around in sugar sacks, if you will, cells surrounded by saline water. But, you know, no one associates, metal pipes, tubes, veins, windpipes with a machine, like
Hmm.
biological construction of a robot, but not just a soulless, heartless, meaningless robot.
Oh, do
Your
you know? I've
body
heard.
is a product, it's a construction, it's a design
Just want to get one thing
to
in,
host
Jimbo.
something.
So, I've heard someone else talking about this exact thing, which was Dave Murphy when talking about breatharianism.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, that's the idea that you don't need to eat.
Yep.
Well, it's a strong possibility that our energy comes from the energy of the kind of association between the water formation. When OH and H get together, they release electricity or wave energy that gives us the impulses that we need to fire nerves, to move tendons and muscles and everything. It comes from electricity or from wave energy that moves through the body, that comes from the creation of water.
Sorry,
And
if I could
carbon
just.
dioxide is
Breatharianism basically suggests that you feed directly off the ether, basically. And I think it is a strong possibility. My father very much believed it, and he even did courses to do it. And yeah, the hardest part is psychological because we are so used to eating and all these things. It's just very hard to accomplish. But
Uh,
it is a possibility, and I am going to figure it out also.
Yeah, we've been trained to have a cellular dependency on materials, including what we call nutrition and stuff.
If I could
Part of
just interrupt a sec, I don't mean to be rude, but I noticed that it is the real sheeps and neeps in chat. Could everybody in chat just let him know that the water argument should be dropped? There's enough evidence to show that hydrogen and oxygen does come from water. So sheeps, come on, drop that argument, man. It's not.
yeah, when it comes to water as an element on its own, really only in one sense, like would I ever consider it an element on its own, is when you force it out of a reaction to get other chemicals to react. You don't consider it, you're driving off H and OH, you're driving off water as an element to force a reaction to take place. So in that sense, yes, water is treated in chemistry as an element of its own, because it's a big problem. You either drive it out of solutions and stuff to get things to move forward, or it can inhibit what you're doing.
I think there's a comparing. If you listen to some of our talks with Zach, and I'm comparing my standard chemistry with his alchemical chemistry. The term element and that has a different connotation. And there's a differential between the kind of pure physical chemistry that I'm talking about, and the definition of element there, and the more elemental terms where we're talking about a more older understanding of things that classes water as one of the essential elements. And I think there's a differential in maybe the way that's being spoken about, but there is a reason for that, and that's even in modern chemistry. Water's a completely nonsensical compound. It breaks all the laws that all the others follow. It does things on its own. It's less dense when it's a solid to a liquid, like any, the complete opposite of any other or most other
Adam.
Well, water as a word doesn't really describe what the substance is and all its properties and forms, and what it actually, the expanse and breadth of what it does and what it's involved in is beyond the word.
And with that, I'm going to say first and foremost, a huge, massive, enormous thank you to all of the debating panel for making this debate possible. And of course, a massive thank you to all of the live audience for tuning in and hopefully sharing this debate. If you hated the show, you know exactly what to do. But if you liked the show, maybe consider sharing it with a friend or subscribing if you have not done so already. I've been Nathan Oakley, and I'll see you all in the next video.
Oh, what a day! What a lovely day!